Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Buzzwords and Music. I'm here this evening with bass player extraordinaire, teacher, just all around great guy, Russ Rodgers. And we're going to be talking to Russ about his experience playing bass throughout the years and who he studied with and where he's taught. Russ currently lives in Washington D.C. I met him while he was still here in Atlanta. And where are you from originally, Russ?
Atlanta.
You're like one of the few.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a little more and more nowadays. But for the longest time, you would have to hunt to find somebody who was actually from Atlanta.
Yeah, people would ask me, where are you from? Atlanta. I go, you are? Like it was weird or something.
Yeah, and it kind of was.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
I'm not sure if it's still the case now, because most of the people I know have been here forever.
Yeah, that's true.
So you're an actual native.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Georgia Baptist Hospital,
there
downtown
you.
Atlanta.
All right. You still remember the nurse's name? No.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time that I met you, but I'm not sure it's the first time that we met. Um, I'll relate my story after you relate yours because I think you kind of predate my story.
All right.
So yeah, so how did we actually meet? Because we've known each other. You know, sometimes you know somebody for so long you don't even remember the origin story.
It was a gig at this place called Ivy something. I can't remember the exact club. It was kind of like one of these places that you walk into and you just kind of felt like there's more going on there than you probably
A little
you
something
probably really
shady.
want to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but like guys walking around with guns and stuff. But
Oh, so
it
it's
was,
just like my days back in New York.
mhm. Anyway, it was on a gig. I got hired to play a job, and now I know you were on it, but I don't remember who else was there.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe there was a singer. I'm sure there was probably a drummer, but I can't even
Yeah. I.
picture who that was. I just remember that's where I met you, and that was it.
And and that would have been fairly early in me getting to Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta in '79.
As I recall, yeah, I believe you said you hadn't been in Atlanta very long. You just got there fairly recently. Now I don't remember how long you were there, but
Right. Um, yeah, that would probably been within the first 6 months, I would think.
yeah, that's probably a good guess.
But the first time um, maybe this was like a one nighter that we did together or something.
I think it was actually a couple of nights.
Great.
I
You're
man,
gonna make my story sound really bad.
it might have been man. Gosh,
I know it's been so
yeah,
long. Because the
yeah.
first
Let's just say it's a one nighter. That works.
that works. Because that'll make things a little more forgivable. Because my first real recollection of you was probably not too long after that. There used to be a club in town called the Uptown Cafe. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
and
Alan Harris. I worked there with Alan Harris. You remember him?
okay, I do. I remember the name.
Yeah, he's in
Oh,
New York now,
okay,
and he's actually did a lot of video stuff. And he did these, during the pandemic, did one of the one of the live, you know, um, pay me by Venmo gigs,
right.
type things that everybody was doing, when they couldn't work. And I piped in and said, "Hey, it's Russ Rodgers from Atlanta. I used to work with you." And he kind of, I'm not sure if he really remembered me or not, but he acted like he did.
Yeah, well, at least he's acting.
Yeah.
So, but the first time I really took notice of you was there at the Uptown Cafe. I came in one night, and this was a real after hours type joint.
Yeah. We started at 2 a.m. I think.
2 in the morning, I think, and a lot of the musicians when they finished up their gigs would come out and check out whatever was going on there. And
Yeah. Because remember Opa was playing there.
oh yes, I
Yeah.
met. That's where I met Hugo Fataruso and
Mhm.
became friends with him and ended up with his Rhodes.
In fact, Alan Harris came on after they were playing the first set, the early shift, which was like 10 to 2. And then Alan came on at 2. So
Okay.
we used to go there earlier to check them out.
Well, eventually I found out that he was playing there, and I didn't even know who he was. I just walked in one night and I heard this guy playing. I was like, "Oh my God, this dude is killing!" And then I went up and met him, and I won't get into a whole lot of Hugo Fataruso right now, but he and I became very good friends. His duration here, and even after they went back to Argentina and did some tours there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's the place where I remember seeing you, and I remember at the time you were heavily influenced by Jaco Pastorius.
I was Jaco. At least
Well,
I thought I was.
well, because my horn player at the time uh, was from Philadelphia, and he kept saying, "Man, the next time when I go back home, I'm going to bring this guy back a Phillies cap so he can just go ahead and complete the set." And but we were always very impressed with your playing. And then I think we just kind of went back and forth a lot through the years until like 96. You kind of, I hold you responsible for bringing me out of retirement.
Oh yeah. The what was the
Vinings.
place? Vinings Inn. Yeah.
Just a quick footnote for our listeners. Russ called me one night and said, "Hey, I've got a gig at this place called the Vinings Inn." Now, I've been in the studio for the last 7 or 8 years, so outside of an occasional tour, I was not gigging locally. And I was like, "Great, who's in it?" And he goes, "Well, it's me, I got a drummer, and you." And I was like, "Trio?" And you were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Russ, I probably don't know 6 songs." And you were like, "Well, we'll just do those 6." And, the gig was a very low-key gig, but it was actually really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and every week I would keep adding to my repertoire until,
Yeah, those 6 songs got pretty good, didn't they?
they did. And then, you would play the heads on a lot of songs. So it wasn't like we were just, a jukebox on repeat or something. You had things that you brought to the table, and we just had to work around my little bit of limitations at that point. But because of that gig, I went on to, I kept doing trio right up until like 2010.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it.
And in fact, you took over that gig, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you left to go do something else.
I think the League of Decency got busy or something at that time.
That may be it.
Yeah.
And then Joseph Patrick Moore came in,
Uh-huh.
and he was with me. If he wasn't there, LeBron Scott was. And Russ is one of my 3 favorite bass players that, well, none of you are in this city anymore. Joseph's out in Vegas.
I didn't know Joe left. Okay. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
he's been gone for 3 years now, 3 maybe 4.
Of course, we lost LeBron.
We've lost LeBron, and then you moved to DC.
Yeah, that was
So-
out of the blue.
Yeah, how's the music scene out there?
Fantastic.
Yeah,
And it's not just DC. This whole area is like Baltimore, DC, Northern Virginia, all the way down to Richmond, south, and then west past Dulles Airport, of Philadelphia. I mean, everybody's in and out of all these cities. I mean, I played in Pittsburgh a month ago.
oh wow,
I go to Philadelphia a lot, play in Baltimore all the time. Alexandria, Virginia, which is just across the river from DC, so it's almost really the same thing.
yeah, that's very close.
So it because of the vastness of it, I mean, you got just enormous amount of incredible musicians. Gary Granger lives 5 miles from me. Mike Pope, who was in Chick Corea's Electric Band, when John
Right.
couldn't do it, lives probably 30 minutes from here. And I went up to his house and studio and took some lessons from him. And bass player for Spyro Gyro, Scott Ambrose, he lives up in Fredericks, which is just north of Rockville.
Wow,
So I mean, you got some of the greatest bass players in the world living around here.
and
then-
you've studied with some of the greats.
Yeah, yeah.
Timmy Haslip of Yellow Jackets.
That was because AIM and Randy Hexter got him. Well, actually, Randy got him to play on his record.
Yeah,
And then Jimmy did clinics over at AIM. So while, when Jimmy would do clinics, I grabbed him for some lessons.
yeah. I just had a talk with Randy last week on the show. So, yeah, and he definitely, and he introduced Jimmy to Joseph,
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the one thing I've always liked about the music community here. And I'm sure it's kind of the same in other places, but I feel like here, and even though you're not here now, there wasn't this whole, um, you know, oh, I don't want you taking my gigs and,
Mm-hmm.
or using my people and blah. It's much more of a communal sense, and
It's like that
everybody's,
here too.
yeah, good, because it tends to work better, and it broadens the palette of people that you can use and who you want to work with and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And you just learn from everybody that you
Oh
play
yeah.
with.
I mean, the local guys around here, I mean, they're great players everywhere in Atlanta. I mean, they're just all over the place. But the thing that's different from here than Atlanta is just there's so many more of great players. I mean, the numbers, are
Right.
just so much more.
So I know better than to move to DC.
I mean, there's just tons of them. I mean, bass player after bass player, you go to these jams and one guy after the next is just great.
Yeah. So
In fact, I'm going to one tonight after finish here. Uh, there's jams almost every night here.
really,
Yeah. I mean, again, because of the vastness of the area, I mean, I'm 30 minutes from Baltimore, so I can just hop in my car and go up and be in a whole completely different city,
yeah.
you know.
So and is that what you do typically? Sometimes
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, I,
There's a jam up there. No, I'm not going there tonight. There's one. I'm going to this different one in DC tonight. But sometimes I go to this one up they have every Monday in Baltimore.
mm-hmm.
And then there's a jazz brunch I've done Sundays up in Baltimore quite frequently. Great jazz guitar player named Michael Ratzik. Like I said, just player after player. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
phenomenal. I got to work with some of the military guys here, because they have all the president's band, I mean, the guys that play at the White House all the time. I've done gigs with them.
Mm.
And I hear a bunch of stories about, president stuff.
Right.
So,
Do you have clearance?
well, I don't, they do,
Yeah.
but they would, say like, for example, when Obama was president, they had the best time with him because he loved jazz and everything. In fact, they had jazz at the White House every day
Yeah.
because Obama wanted jazz. So they called to the Marine base and say, we need jazz trio up here today. So those guys would go over there.
Yep.
And then he would say, like, right before Obama would go out and make a speech, in the Rose Garden, some big political thing,
They will have
or
a warm up.
international thing, you know, um, he'd be joking with the band, before he went out, just one of the guys. But then he said it was amazing to see this guy just flip a switch and become President Obama
Yeah.
as soon as he walked out that door. But before, man, he might have well been in the band.
Yeah, I've known a couple of politicians here like that. Um, when I first moved here, I did I played for Maynard Jackson's inaugural,
Mm-hmm.
and man, he was just like one of the guys,
Yeah, yeah, they're
you
all
know.
people.
But until he went up on stage, and then he became a politician, and
Yeah,
you
they
know,
flip a switch, man. Those guys are
yeah,
just master uh, political actors, I guess you'd call them. That they can just turn this thing on, and
I guess that's a good thing about being a musician. We don't have to flip too many switches unless they're connected to amplifiers
yeah,
or something like that.
yeah,
We get to be ridiculous all the time, and people accept that as
mhm.
our natural state. Now, and you have always been a player. I don't, and by that I mean you seem to like really live for the live performance.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
More so than anything else.
yeah, and teaching has actually afforded me that luxury that I can do more of what I want to do.
Right.
Musically, especially now that it's the business has gotten so much stronger than it used to be. That over the years I've built up quite a clientele. With the online thing, and it's really freed me up, and it's great.
Yeah, and I want to get into your teaching career on that in that as well. I just you know, to your point about the teaching enabling you to do more gigs and things like that. When I was working at the studio, when you called me to do the vinings, it became, yeah, that's something I want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
no longer have to do it.
And that's where the magic is, man.
That's where, because then you bring your game to the, you should always approach a gig as if
But yeah,
it's,
but
but
there is a difference.
yes, when you don't have to do something, when you get to do it for the actual love of doing it, and
There's,
the
yeah,
love of doing it outweighs whatever monetary value you're going to get.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
nothing better.
yeah. Now most of us can't get to that point in our 20s or whatever.
Hmm. Well,
That's
yeah,
part of
everybody's still
playing,
trying to be a star, you know.
and that's paying dues too. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't think between the two of us we know that many stars that that came from playing in some wedding band or
Hmm.
whatever. But now you've been teaching for how long now? Seriously teaching?
I started in 1985,
Wow.
um, and it started as a fluke, because at that time there was a satellite school for the Musicians Institute, which is located in Hollywood, California,
Mm-hmm.
which was basically a DeVry for musicians, right?
Huh.
Professional training for musicians.
Right.
And so Steve Freeman, an actually great jazz guitar player,
Uh,
he hated to play live, but no, I don't think anybody really knew how good he was. But in any case, he was running this place to prime people to send them out to California to the school. That was really what it was for. But
right.
eventually, he decided to open up his own shop, because why should I send them all the money? So anyway, he started the Atlanta Institute of Music, and it had just like started that. And then I got a call from, I don't know how I got referred to this, but he called me and said, "Do you want to do a clinic with Scott Henderson?" And I didn't even know who Scott Henderson was at that time, although
Huh.
was in Chick Corea's Electric Band,
Right.
one of the first early versions of it. And but I quickly found out who he was because I did research, and
Huh.
and by the time I got there, I was scared to death. But because this guy was just
Yeah.
a big time A team, right?
Well, yeah,
Anyway,
you're on stage with a guy that plays with Chick Corea every night.
yeah,
What is he going to think of me? And
yeah, man,
he's with John Patitucci and
yeah, it's like okay. But in any case, after doing it, it went fine, but after doing it, I said, you know what, if I get involved with this place, I might be able to play with some cool people. I mean, that was my initial thinking, that well, it might put me in a position where I can make some really cool connections,
right.
which actually turned out to be the case, because I got to play with John Scofield, Robin Ford,
Yeah.
so yeah,
A lot of guitar players came through AIM.
yeah, yeah, it was basically a guitar school. They had a bass
But
program.
but they've opened up now, right?
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
got production and
Hmm.
yeah, all kinds of classes. Is
But
that where you got to meet and work a little bit with Patitucci or?
no, that came much later. The But at AIM, the thing is that I I started a bass program there because I went to Steve Freeman because he didn't have one. It was just
Oh,
guitar. And I said, "Hey man, let's do a bass program." And he said, "Do you teach?" And I went, "Yeah." I lied, but I said, "Yeah."
yeah.
So and then I just started doing it,
Hmm.
and so after a while, just developed a curriculum and figured out what worked, what didn't, and over the
Did,
years, it's really refined into something to where I can pretty much promise somebody, if you do what I tell you to do, and it's, in the way I tell you to do it, you you'll be able to play. It'll
yeah.
work.
Well,
But
did you enjoy it? When
yeah, I
because
get paid. I
go
get paid
ahead.
to sit around and talk about my favorite subject all day.
Yeah. Well, because the reason I asked that is because when I first decided I was going to start teaching, um, so many people were like, "Oh man, you're gonna hate it. They're not gonna practice, and you're gonna just get frustrated and blah blah blah." And and I took all that with a grain of salt, but I loved it
Yeah, it's
and
great.
still do. Yeah,
Nothing helped my playing more because, it just really made me think about stuff. In order for
I
me to explain it to somebody, I had to really kind of,
ex- exactly.
think,
You have to
think it
know what
through,
you yeah, because there's so many things I learned when I was in college or whatever that I've just internalized. I just know how to do them. But then when a student asks you, well, why? Then it's like, I got to go back and remember why I did this.
Mm-hmm.
I always revert back to this quote Pat Martino gave me shortly after I first moved here. I saw him at EJ's one night.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't afford to go in and see him, so I just sat at the bar and listened. But anyway, he came to the bar after his set, and I introduced myself and blah blah blah. Anyway, his advice was learn everything you can about music and then forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 24, 25-year-old snot-nosed punk. What did I know about? I had no idea what he was talking about, but I was like, if Pat said it, it must be good. And I get it now because as we teach, we've had so many things. It's just like, a language. You've acquired this vocabulary, but you don't necessarily know the origins of the word.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a language. Music by definition is communication based on emotion.
Yeah.
The player feels, plays, the listener hears, feels. You're communicating feelings through the use of sounds.
Absolutely.
So if you teach it like a language, the problem, whoever learns a language by learning out of a book? Nobody. You got to go to a place.
You got to use
that's
it.
where they speak the language, and then you stay there long enough and you get it. But so many people, I don't know. The problem with that, the big thing about it is that you have the external thing of the instrument that's involved. That's probably the biggest difference between music and the spoken language is you have to get this extra thing in there, right?
Right.
But Victor Wooten has really got that thing in play to where he doesn't worry about technique when he teaches. He just gets them to play.
Yeah.
Because you have to
look at
experience the playing
word.
to understand. You can't, it's like explaining sentence structure to somebody who can't talk yet. If you're talking about theory and scales and stuff to somebody who can't play yet, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But if they can play something, say, oh, that's this, then you've got a reference to, oh, okay. It starts to make sense. Right.
And that's the whole point of the word play. If you think about it, we had parents or whatever, or we know people that go to their job every day. Oh, I got to go to work tonight. We just go, hey, I got to go play tonight.
Mm-hmm.
It's psychologically it's freeing because it may be a job and it may be work, but we're playing, and there's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
As
long as the player's on, it can be a long night if, you're working with people that aren't in the same place, because, one of my favorite John Patitucci quotes is it's only a groove if everybody agrees where it is, so.
That's true.
So if everybody's not in the same place, it might be a struggle, it might not be as much fun as a night to where everybody's in the same place and everybody's talking to each other.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you have to, but at the same time, I've always felt like I've played with people who are better than I am.
Well, you're fortunate because that's the way you get better.
Yeah.
I always like to be the worst guy in the band because that's what makes you grow.
Well, I got news for you, Russ. When we did the trio, you weren't the worst guy in the band. Here.
But Buzz, you're a kid. Yeah, but you may not have known a bunch of tunes at that point because you hadn't played in a while. But man, you've always been an extraordinary musician. I mean, you got the gift, So
well,
that's why I wanted you to do it.
Yeah, well, and I always appreciated that because it gave me a whole different set of a whole different set of confidence levels that I'd never experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
And and it also helped me get very good at communicating verbally with an audience as well.
That's what I really liked about what you did. That was my, that you were entertaining.
I knew how to waste some time in
Yeah.
between those 6 songs.
Yeah, but it was good though. I mean, you would tell jokes. I mean, people would enjoy it. I mean, you people would listen to you. I mean, you had a way of communicating, that way that
Well,
I couldn't do.
I always feel like when you're playing music that people are not accustomed to hearing, that you have to involve them in it. And if you can involve them, even if it's telling a little humorous anecdote or whatever, it brings them to the music more.
Mm-hmm.
And then they feel that, oh, he's relating to me, I'm going to relate to him. So it becomes kind of I'll meet you halfway.
Yeah.
But and I used to do that back in the '80s when I had fusion groups. I'd do the same thing. I just, by the time we got together and played, I hadn't done it in a long time.
Right.
So it was kind of getting that skill set kind of back in place.
Mm-hmm.
But, playing in a trio, you actually showed me a different way to listen to things that I would, because I've always been larger ensemble playing. So I knew my designated part and my role. But as part of a trio, it's totally up for grabs at a lot of times. And it took me a while to get that. And you really helped bring that confidence in me on that.
Let's just doing it,
Well, there is the just doing it, but there is.
Well,
It's doing
well,
it
thank
with
you,
it's doing it with people who can help guide you at what it is that you're actually trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be times where you would go, you shouldn't do that there. It's gonna, and I'm like, okay, like Porky used to or LeBron.
Yeah.
When we played together, now LeBron was straight up R&B player
Mm-hmm.
that could pretty much play anything.
Mm-hmm.
But he had to hear any piano chord. He didn't want to hear syncopation in the left hand. He wanted that left hand to be on the one. And that's not always the case.
Yeah.
But I had to start doing that with him, and it made everything so much better.
Mm-hmm. That's again, getting, learning how to work with people, knowing what works and making, to get the best music out of everybody, to make the overall performance really work is an art in itself. You got to be able to know how to work with people, and not expect everybody to do everything the same way,
Right, because, I can play with you one night and I'm going to sound one way, and I could play with LeBron the next night and I'm going to sound, it'll still
Mm-hmm.
be me, but I'm going to play differently.
Yeah.
Because also in what we do, it's very reactive music.
Mm-hmm.
Anything can happen at any given moment, and you have to be prepared to do that. There's many a nights where I've played with people that they go somewhere else, and I'm just like, I'm just going to sit back and listen for a few bars until I can figure out what's going on. And there's no shame in that either.
No, man.
There's a lot to be said in silence.
Yeah, play rest.
Yeah.
Well,
what was it Debussy used to say? It's not the notes, it's the silence between the notes that matter.
Yeah. But silence or space or rest or whatever you want to call it is not something. It's not like a hole it's not like a bucket that you need to put water in.
Right.
It's as much a part of the sound as the actual notes, and the sound that you actually hear.
Well, and I
So
think
musician who knows how to use the rest, knows how to play rest.
right, and I think as younger musicians, I know this was certainly the case for me. It would be like, oh, I'm going to play everything I know in every single solo I take.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back and I have some of those recordings from like the early 80s. And I go back and I listen to that and I was like, Jesus, God, did you ever think of taking a breath?
Yeah.
But I guess, that's all part of the
Yeah,
developmental.
you learn, you learn and grow. That I like that Dizzy Gillespie quote. Can't remember who was working with him at the time, but they had just thought they had played a great night, and they were like playing cards after the gig, and um, I think it was a bass player. I can't think of his name, but he said, "Man, I really, what'd you think of that solo?" And Dizzy looked up and said, "Well, yeah, man, sounded good, man. But you know what? Leave some holes, some music might fall out."
Yeah.
So he said he kind of lost his hand at poker and thought about that for a minute.
Yeah. So
But yeah,
yeah, there's it's all about it's really all about listening to what's going on around you.
get your ears above the music.
Yes.
That's a Jocko quote, by the way.
Oh, really?
Get your ears above the music. Listen to the overall.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly, that's one thing I think I learned from being in production for so long is that I try and listen to what makes what you're doing sound good, what makes the drummer do what he's doing sound good, and things like that, where you have a lot of musicians that approach music that everything else is revolving around them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to, fall in line with you. And, for any younger musicians out there getting started, it's quite the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get, like you say, everyone in agreement to that, you're going to have some magical evenings.
Yeah.
Now we did a couple of, we did a Japan tour. What year was that? Do you remember?
1996.
96. Wow. You got a good memory.
Well, because I remember because it was the Olympics, the Atlanta Olympics were going on.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I have something I can equate that to, but I won't right now. But yeah. And didn't we do a gig there? And I know I'm not dreaming this. Now, we were out with the group, the 3 Degrees,
Right.
which were, they still tour. R&B group had a big hit with the song.
Are you in contact with them still?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell them I said, hey.
Yeah, I
Because
mentioned
I live, I'm 3 hours from Philly.
none of them live in Philly.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
No, Valerie lives here. Helen is in California now, and
okay.
And Cynthia is no longer there. They replaced her with this girl Freddie, and she's out in L.A.
Okay, so they used to live in Philly, right?
Years and years.
Okay.
Well, Helen used to live in Philly up until about 4 years ago.
Okay, that's because I remember they wanted me to come up for a rehearsal there in Philly.
Well, sometimes when they do rehearse, that's what they do.
So I thought they were in Philly. Okay.
No, that's where they're originally from, and they were a Philly, a product of Philly International Records, so with Gamble and Huff.
Okay.
But didn't we do a gig one night that was kind of like an upscale brothel? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, that was my first gig.
Was
in
that
Tokyo? That was the very first night I played. That was my very first show I did. Was at that place.
Oh my God! No telling what you thought about this gig then, because then
I didn't see or hear nothing because I was just so focused on trying to get everything right, because I didn't know the music that well, I mean, we'd rehearsed it, but it's just like I was I was just like show focused the whole time.
Right. Well, you were reading at the time too.
Yeah, so I didn't see nothing.
I just that just stuck in my head, and then I think right after that we ended up with at the Blue Notes and all that.
Yeah,
You know
right.
those.
Mhm.
So that might have been like the prelude to the the bigger, the more important venues,
Yeah.
if you if you want to use that term. But I didn't know if I was imagining that or not, because Jan
No.
Rico was on that gig as
Yeah.
well, and
Mhm.
I never really reconfirmed that with him. So I'm glad you remembered. I thought it was some kind of a brothel
Yeah,
that,
it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. No, and here I thought that girl really liked me.
Oh yeah.
Well, there's always that. Um, so, what do you see? Where do you see yourself going in the next 5 years? Say.
Oh, a continuation of trying to get better, predominantly as a jazz player. I'm working on other stuff too, just because I need to for teaching and certain jobs I do in terms of, techniques on the bass and that kind of thing. But also I enjoy, I mean, I've been doing a lot of blues gigs lately. Some really good blues artists up here. So learning that, learning those things,
Do you keep up with new music at all?
not as much as I should, because I'm playing with bands that don't do a lot of that.
Right.
I'm mostly doing, you know, jazz stuff or the blues stuff right now. Occasional Latin thing. But in terms of like the new hip hop, now there've been a couple of gigs that, that have had that kind of thing. That go-go was like a style that really originated from DC, that.
Right. Yeah, I remember
So
that.
so there's a lot of that. The Chuck Brown band, very famous band that, got that thing going here that everybody always talks about. Um,
What about some of the new jazz that's out though?
New jazz, you mean like the new recordings of?
Like there's groups like Soul and Pimp, um, Larry Gilchrist. Um,
Well,
I don't know if these are new terms for you or
I,
what.
I'm I'm not familiar with those names. I probably should be. I'm still learning so much about the older styles right now. And for me, it's always been I get into what I'm doing in terms of like if I have gigs and people I'm working with, that's what I'm into. That's what I work on. And to get those performances ready. And that's one thing I wish I'd learned a lot younger was that the thing, man. If any young musicians are listening to me now, man, learn songs.
Yes,
Learn as many songs as you can. That's you're going to be your road to success.
absolutely.
Forget the scales, forget the fancy stuff. Learn songs because that will keep you working. That will get you more and better jobs. You'll learn more about music that way, in
Yes,
the
it
right
teaches
way.
you chord
You know,
progressions and
yeah, but in the right way.
yeah.
You sit there and work out of a book or play a bunch of scale exercises. Man, that's not going to help you.
No,
Learn songs.
I agree with you on that 100%. Um, you
and
know,
forget scales. Learn your arpeggios and triads, man. That's
yeah,
I wish I'd known that 30 years ago. I mean, actually, I have to say that I heard somebody say that, but I just didn't listen. Carol Kay did an interview one time I read a long time ago. She said,
uh-huh.
forget scales, just learn chords and your triads. And I'm saying, no, you need scales. And she was, man, I'm sorry, Carol. I should have listened to you. I would have.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. Um, I know, like for myself, I have a decent working knowledge of scales, but I've never thought in terms of scales.
Well, see,
E-
see, the thing is it's taught wrong because people. Well, see, the thing is, you have to learn what a scale is before you understand what an arpeggio is, right? Because arpeggio comes from the scale.
Right.
But when you apply it, you apply arpeggios and chord tones, and all the other notes are simply connectors. You just got to learn how to connect them right, and that's it. We're
Yeah.
done. You know.
All right, now see, people that studied for 50 years, you don't need that. Russ just gave you a lesson in 30
Man,
seconds.
if I'd known that 30 years ago, man, but
Yeah,
live and learn.
I can totally see that. I mean, as a soloist, I tend to think motifically.
Yeah.
I'll start with a 3 or 4 note phrase,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just I'm content riding that 3 or 4 notes for a whole chorus before I
Yeah.
start moving. It didn't used to be that way. It used to
Yeah.
be, let me get in. If you come out blazing with 16th note runs and everything, where do you have to go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And always make your stuff feel good. Victor Wooten always says, groove your way to the answer.
Yeah.
No matter what you play, it can still feel good. You can hit every wrong note in the book, but they can still groove.
Yeah.
Kevin Bales I learned a lot from him, and I need to hook back up with him too.
Kevin became one of my favorite piano players here in
chord
the city.
tones on downbeats, man. If you're playing eighth notes, chord tones on downbeats, 16th notes, play them on the eighth notes. I mean, this basic math, of course, that's not all you do, but if you have that basic foundation in your note choices and how you use them rhythmically, because I think the key to a good line is the musician's ability to control notes rhythmically, where you place the harmony in context with the rhythm. Again, we're done. That's what you got to learn how to do. You know, just like when you speak in a language, words have to fall out in a certain order to make sense. The way it works in the language of music is what goes where in the rhythm.
Yeah. I agree with you. And Kevin, I finally actually got to see him on a gig several years ago. It was the first time I'd ever heard him on a gig. I was blown away because it was nothing like what I used to hear him in the little room where he taught.
Yeah, because I was taking lessons with him while you were there.
Yeah, you were taking, and he'd have some piano players that came in that were almost just as good as he was, and it would be like listening to a concert between the two of them. But hearing him on an actual gig, it shocked me because I always had this thought of him being a very traditional pianist, and he's not. He's very playful, and he's got a lot of
and there are guys up here that have toured with him that I run into that know him, that have done so. That singer he used to work with. There's a drummer up here that did a bunch of tours with him on that.
Yeah, I remember Jimmy Jackson had moved there. Up in DC.
They still talk about Junebug. Yeah. There's a lot of Junebug stories up here.
It doesn't take long for a Junebug story to emerge from wherever he's at.
We always got along, man. I missed him. In fact, he would call me from DC and said, "Man, you got to move up here. It's great. You got to come up."
Yeah, some of my favorite playing was when he did that Dailies gig with me for almost 2 years, and man, it was just every night was just incredible.
He had a gift.
Yeah, he sure did. So, what?
So you asked me what I see myself doing.
Yeah.
More of the same, teaching and playing.
Yeah.
Playing and teaching. I mean, that's what it's going to be until I can't do it no more.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that's not for a long time to come yet.
Yeah.
We've kind of touched on this, and you've kind of answered it along the way. But if we had to put it in just a few sentences or whatever, what advice do you have for young players that are coming up?
Open mind, of course. Learn songs.
Yeah. Okay.
Learn songs, man. I'm telling you. Bill Wilson, you remember Bill Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing he did that at the time I was saying, I was into like learning about the scale stuff at the time. I was distracted by all that crap. But I remember him just getting into. He said, "Man, learn songs." And he's right on it, man, because he could. He worked a lot, and one of the reasons he did is because he knew all the songs. No matter what song somebody would call, he could play it.
Yeah.
And that's what gets you work. The more you work, the more you work up with better people. And, the more you play with better people, the better you get, the more you learn about the stuff that you need to do and stuff you shouldn't do. I think that's probably the biggest thing is learn songs.
Yeah.
Practice playing music. Don't forget to practice playing music.
Yes. I mean, you should, and I don't use the term practice. I use the term spending time with your instrument,
Mm-hmm.
because practice makes it sound like it's going to be a chore.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean,
and,
yeah.
and this is just for me. I tend to, I see that I get a little better results from my students when I never mention the word practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
play this.
yeah, then they're going to have to practice.
Yeah, play this.
But it just really boils down to you do have to spend time with your instrument,
Mm-hmm.
and with music in general. There was a time in my 20s I used to learn a lot of songs, but I only learned half of them. So people used to call me half a tune Buzz.
Okay.
But I knew those half a tunes. I just couldn't get to the bridge, but
Well, I know you don't like the word practice, but one other thing for young musicians,
Mhm.
always practice the way you're going to play.
Interesting.
Because why, if you're practicing something you're not going to do, why are you doing that? Practice what you're going to do. Practice and, even from a physical standpoint, if you're going to play standing up, then you should practice in the way with the instrument in the same way. Now you can sit down and do it that way, but I have a lot of students that'll sit and play like this. And then I say, are you going to perform that way? No, you're going to perform this way. Well, why are you practicing this way? We're talking about developing muscle memory, right? So, you want to do things in the way that you're actually really going to do them.
That's a good point. That's an excellent point.
Don't practice stuff you're not going to play. It doesn't make sense.
Because with LeBron, he liked to sit down and he'd like to play. But if I really needed him to give, even if this was in the studio, if I needed him to give me a really solid groove, man, stand up. And because then he's getting this whole other motion going,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden that magic would come out of him.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see that. I've just never really thought about that.
So yeah, that's it, man.
Well, if anybody's so inclined to want to take lessons from you, how do they reach you?
Russ Rodgers, bassguitar.com website has all the information you need in terms of, if you're going to do the Skype thing. Of course, if you're in the DC area, you can always come over to where I teach here. But I have some people that do that, but I try to encourage them to do Skype just because it's just so much easier. Why spend 30 minutes in your car, both, one way? You could save an hour out of your day, but and with the right setup, it works fine,
Yeah,
but I've had a lot of people say, man, that have done in-person lessons and switched. They said, man, I should have done this a long time.
I find it harder with piano.
Yeah, you gotta be creative with how you do the camera, and stuff. Because with me, I can hold the bass right here. I don't have to do that much. But if you're doing the thing to where you have a different angle, now if you could have a camera set up. You could have it up here, and there's a little switch that you just hit a button and it'll go for this camera, and you could do it that and switch back.
Yeah, you can, but the problem is that you can't tell when someone's using their forearm incorrectly, or if they're not dropping their wrist with the proper weight. These are things that you can only, like, a lot of times when somebody's playing, I have a habit of reaching under their
Mhm.
under the arm here and doing that. And if their hand doesn't move, they're not playing right.
Mhm.
And I,
Yeah.
haven't figured out how to do that online unless I can send like
There,
some
yeah.
electric shock.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that you got to work around, but for me with the bass, it's I haven't found anything that I can't really do just as well.
Right. Yeah, and
Because
if you've been playing, if you can already play when I have a student, if you're already a player, then I'm not as concerned about it. Um,
yeah. But another thing is I don't worry about the hands so much right off the bat, because what I found that really keeps people interested is that I always say, why are you here? And they kind of look at me and, well, what do you mean? I said, well, everybody has a picture in their mind of what they want to do with the instrument. I need to see that picture so I can help you get there. And a lot of times it's they want to play something, and so what I do is I find out what they want to play and I get a hold of that song or genre or whatever it might be, and we start working on that right away. And I don't, within reason, I don't really make a big deal about the hands right off the bat. I let them get to where they can play something and feel inspired that, oh wow, man, I'm really doing it, and so within a lesson or two, they're actually already working on what they envision themselves doing. And
right.
then through I use that song or whatever it is we're working on as a vehicle for the hands. I found that if I say, okay, well, hold your hands like this and do this right off the bat, man, that 2 lessons are gone, but
I do
but
a
if I
similar
use
I do a similar thing where I get them playing something quickly.
that's important, man. You got to
Yeah.
get them playing some music so that they experience, oh man, it's great.
And
Because then they'll listen to you about the other stuff.
right. And then I always ask them, send me like 3 to 5 different things that you would really like to learn how to play at some point.
And start them off with that, man.
Yeah, and I picked the easiest thing that I think they can do.
Yeah. Plus,
And,
with the software like the slow downer,
right.
that audio
Yeah.
that you can slow the audio down now.
Yeah.
Man, I had one guy want to learn a Guns N' Roses tune. That had that bass. I can't think of the song now. Da, da, that bass intro.
I wouldn't know it.
Okay. Anyway, and it was like his dream to play a little kid. I mean, he probably 10, 11 years old.
Oh wow.
And I mean, like the thing was like 1, 2, 3, and we were like working like 1, 2. I mean, dead slow. It didn't really even sound like it, But the thing is that he learned it,
Yeah.
and through learning that thing, we got his hands together, and then but he stayed with me like 5 years, till he had to like go off to college.
Yeah. Great.
So, but that type of thing about getting them to their picture, is huge.
You'll appreciate this. I had one student. He came in. He wanted to start taking lessons. So usually I do a similar thing. I'm like, all right. So what brings you here? And he was like, well, I've never played piano before, but I want to play jazz, and I need to learn it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
I was like, you just created quite a challenge for yourself.
Well, what did he think that meant? I'm curious. What did he think that meant?
Oh, he
playing
thought
jazz?
he was going to be Oscar Peterson in 6 weeks. He literally thought that
How old was he?
in his 30s.
Okay. Wow.
It's like, unless you're holding back on me about knowing something. But I mean, he couldn't even tell me where C was on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did a quick lick, and said, "You want to be able to do that in 6 weeks?" He's like, "Well, that and more."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "I can give you the steps to get there, but you're not going to get there in 6 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Peterson didn't get there in 6 weeks or 6 years.
Yeah. There's, I guess, so for someone who hasn't ever done it, and doesn't have any idea about what's all involved, because it's not just the instrument. A lot of people think it's just the instrument. It's not. You got to learn. It's the language part of it.
Exactly.
that, takes a while.
Yeah, I mean, I can go to France, but that doesn't mean I can speak French,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, well, Russ, I appreciate you spending some time with me. It was good to
Yeah,
catch
man.
up with you.
Yeah. It's good to see you, Buzz. Miss you, dude.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You moved here out of here what in 15, something like that?
Yeah. 2014.
14, so that's 7 years, yeah.
Yeah.
But
It was a unique experience to be able to like just start from scratch,
yeah,
you know?
I've thought about it a couple of times, and I'm like, at my age, I'm not sure how,
Yeah.
you know.
It's
But
just, it's just, you just do it.
yeah, well, you're a young blood too,
Yeah.
so any
All
anyway,
right, man.
well, I appreciate it, and good talking to you, and
Yeah.
you know,
And well, say hey to the fam and
to to the gang.
yeah.
So, all right. And was there any other sites or anything you wanted to direct people to?
No, RussRogersBassGuitar.com. Yeah, it has all my contact info, phone numbers there, emails there, so you can get to me that way. Of course, if that doesn't work, they can always call you and say you got Russ's number.
Yeah, because anyone out there aspiring to be a bass player, I would highly recommend Russ for your teacher.
Well, thank you, because
And,
I can help you. I can definitely
oh
help.
yeah, I think some of the insights that you shared today will definitely resonate with some people.
Well, it's working for me.
Yeah,
When
well,
I started doing it, and that's my whole teaching is really based is what working for me.
yeah, if it works for you and it works for your students, then that's really all that counts.
Mhm.
All right. Well, Russ, have a good evening.
All right, Buzz.
Go out there and hit a jam session,
All right.
and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Buzz.
All
We'll
right,
talk to you
man.
later.
All right. Thank you. Thank